Chosen one, stop scrolling. This is not just a warning, and it's not something completely new either. This is something you've felt before, more than once, but maybe you never had the words to understand it. Think about those moments when you were so close to saying yes. Everything looked right on the surface. It made sense logically. It even felt like progress. And yet, something inside you hesitated. Not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet resistance you couldn't explain. Or those times when an opportunity showed up at what seemed like the perfect moment. It checked all the boxes. It looked like an answer to your prayers. But deep down, there was a subtle discomfort, something that didn't sit right, even though you couldn't prove why. And then there are those seasons where you feel slowed down, like you're ready to move, ready to step forward, ready to build, but something keeps interrupting your momentum. Delays, pauses, redirections. And if you're honest, part of you has wondered, why does this keep happening to me? But here's the truth most people miss. God is not trying to block your life. He is not standing in your way, withholding good things from you. What he is doing is revealing a pattern you haven't fully learned yet. Because the real issue has never been the opportunity itself. The real issue is whether you can tell the difference between what is aligned and what is simply attractive. Not everything that looks good is good for you. Not everything that arrives at the right time is sent by God. And not everything that feels exciting is meant to be accepted. You don't just need open doors. Anyone can walk through an open door. That doesn't require maturity. What you actually need is the ability to recognize when a door should be left alone. The ability to pause when everything in your environment is telling you to rush. The ability to walk away, even when something looks like it could work. Because discernment is not about avoiding obvious mistakes. It's about recognizing subtle misalignment before it becomes costly. And this is where your growth is happening. Not in the big, dramatic moments, but in the quiet decisions no one sees. In the hesitation you don't ignore. In the times you choose clarity over impulse. This is not about fear. God is not trying to scare you into obedience. He is trying to mature your perception. Because if you don't learn this pattern, you won't just miss opportunities. You risk stepping into things that slowly pull you away from who you're becoming. So understand this clearly. This moment is not about panic. It's about awareness. It's about learning how to move through life without sabotaging what God is building in you. If you look closely at how God works throughout Scripture, one pattern becomes very clear. He rarely rushes people into purpose. He prepares them long before he ever releases them. And this is where many people misunderstand what it means when things slow down. They assume delay means denial. They assume resistance means something is wrong. But in reality, what feels like restriction is often preparation happening at a level you can't yet see. Think about Joseph. He was given a vision early, but he didn't step into authority immediately. There were years of confusion, betrayal, and waiting. From the pit to the prison to silence. It didn't look like progress. It looked like everything was going in the wrong direction. But what was really happening? His identity was being formed before his position was revealed. Because if Joseph had stepped into power too early, without the internal stability he developed in hidden places, the pressure of leadership would have destroyed him. The same pattern shows up in David's life. Anointed as king, but sent back to the field. Fighting lions and bears in private while no one was watching. No audience, no validation, just quiet, consistent development. Because God was not just preparing David to defeat Goliath. He was preparing him to carry influence without being consumed by it. Even Jesus, before 3 years of visible ministry, lived 30 years in obscurity. 30 years of hidden life before stepping into public purpose. That alone should challenge the way we think about timing. Because if God valued preparation that much in Jesus' life, why would your process be any different? So when God slows you down, it is not random. It is intentional. And there are reasons behind it that go deeper than what you feel in the moment. First, God restrains to protect your identity. Because environments shape people more than people realize. If you step into the wrong environment too early, before you know who you are, you will start adapting to survive instead of staying aligned with who you were called to be. You'll compromise without noticing. You'll adjust your standards to fit what surrounds you. And slowly, you won't even recognize the shift. So sometimes God slows you down not because the opportunity is bad, but because you are not yet anchored enough to remain yourself inside of it. Second, He restrains to refine your discernment. Not everything that is good is right for you. Not everything that is right now. And this is where maturity is developed. Learning the difference between this could work and this is aligned, between this is available and this is assigned. Discernment is not built in comfort. It is built in moments where you have to pause, question, and choose carefully without full clarity. And every time you listen to that quiet check, instead of overriding it, your ability to recognize truth becomes sharper. Third, God slows you down to break your addiction to speed. Because in this world, speed is often mistaken for success. If it's happening quickly, people assume it's favor. If it's taking time, they assume something is wrong. But God doesn't measure progress the way people do. Fast movement can still lead in the wrong direction, and slow movement can be perfectly aligned. If you are constantly chasing what moves quickly, you will eventually trade depth for momentum. And what you build fast without foundation will not last when pressure comes. This is why slowing down is not punishment. It is recalibration. It is God teaching you that alignment matters more than acceleration. That clarity matters more than excitement. That who you are becoming is more important than how quickly you arrive somewhere. So if you feel like things have been slowing down in your life, don't rush to label it as resistance. Don't assume something is blocking you. Step back and consider another possibility. That what you are experiencing is not delay, but precision. God positioning you carefully, intentionally, so that when you do move forward, you are not just moving fast, you are moving right. Now here's where this becomes real, and this is the part most people overlook. The biggest problem is not deception itself. It's not that the world is full of traps. It's not even that there are wrong doors. The real problem is weak discernment, because deception only works when discernment is underdeveloped. If your ability to recognize alignment is strong, most wrong doors won't even tempt you. But if that ability is weak, you can walk into something that looks right, feels right, and still slowly pulls you off course. So let's make this practical, because this is not abstract. This shows up in everyday decisions more than people realize. The first sign of weak discernment is this: you confuse urgency with direction. Something feels time-sensitive, and you assume that means you need to act quickly. But urgency does not equal alignment. Just because something is available now does not mean it is meant for you now. Pressure often creates the illusion that if you don't move immediately, you'll miss something important. But many of the most costly decisions people make happen when they feel rushed. True direction doesn't need panic to be recognized. It carries clarity, even if the step is difficult. The second sign is that you feel pressured instead of clear. There's a difference between being challenged and being pressured. Pressure comes from the outside. It pushes, it rushes, it creates noise. Clarity comes from within. It's steady, grounded, and doesn't need to convince you loudly. When something is right, it doesn't mean it will be easy. But there is a sense of internal alignment that doesn't fight against your spirit. If you constantly feel like you're being pushed into something, instead of drawn toward it with quiet certainty, that's a signal worth paying attention to. The third sign is that you justify instead of feel peace. You start explaining things to yourself. You build a case. It makes sense. It's a good opportunity. I can make it work. And the more you talk, the more you realize you're trying to convince yourself rather than simply recognizing something as right. When something is aligned, you don't need excessive justification. You may still have questions, but you're not forcing yourself into agreement. Peace doesn't require over-explanation. Misalignment usually does. The fourth sign, and this one is the most subtle, is that you ignore small discomfort. Not loud warnings, not obvious red flags, just small, quiet signals. A slight hesitation, a moment of pause, a feeling you can't fully explain, so you brush it off. But those small signals are often the earliest form of discernment. And when you ignore them repeatedly, you train yourself to override your own awareness. Over time, what was once clear becomes dull. And that's where people start walking into things they later regret. Not because they didn't know, but because they stopped listening. You see this in real life all the time. A job offer that looks perfect on paper. Good pay, good title, good timing. But something inside you feels unsettled. A relationship that seems exciting, even promising, but leaves you feeling drained instead of strengthened. An opportunity that aligns with everything you thought you wanted, yet you can't explain why it doesn't feel right. These are not random emotions. These are moments where discernment is trying to speak before experience has to teach. And here's the deeper truth. The enemy doesn't need to destroy you directly. He doesn't need to create obvious chaos in your life. All he needs is a slight misalignment, just enough to shift your direction, just enough to take your time, your energy, your focus, and move it a few degrees off course. Because over time, small misalignments create major distance. You can still be moving, you can still be progressing, but you're no longer aligned with what truly matters. That's why not every wrong door looks wrong. In fact, some of them look exactly like what you prayed for. That's what makes discernment so important. Because if something looked obviously bad, you wouldn't choose it. The real test is recognizing when something looks good, but isn't right for you. When something feels promising, but carries a hidden cost. And this is why discernment is not dramatic. It doesn't shout. It doesn't force. It doesn't overwhelm. It's quiet, subtle, easy to ignore if you're not paying attention. But if you learn to recognize it, to respect it, and to follow it consistently, it will protect you in ways you won't fully understand until much later. Because in the end, discernment is not about making perfect decisions every time. It's about becoming the kind of person who can sense alignment early enough to avoid unnecessary damage later. That moment when something inside you feels off, that quiet hesitation you can't fully explain, most people label it as confusion. They assume they're overthinking. They assume they're being too sensitive. But what if that inner check is not confusion at all? What if it's actually instruction, just not in words you're used to hearing? Because not every direction from God comes as a clear sentence. Sometimes it comes as a restraint, a pause, a lack of peace. And if you don't understand that language, you'll override it and call it logic. So the question becomes, what do you actually do in that moment? Not theoretically, but practically in real life when you feel that internal check. First, you pause instead of pushing. This is where most people get it wrong. They feel hesitation, and instead of slowing down, they speed up. They try to decide quickly to get rid of the discomfort. But decisions made under emotional intensity are rarely clear. Whether it's excitement or anxiety, both can distort your perception. Pausing doesn't mean you're losing momentum. It means you're creating space for clarity. A decision that is right today will still be right tomorrow. But a decision made too quickly can create consequences that last much longer than the moment you rush through. Second, you remove external noise. Because one of the fastest ways to lose discernment is to replace your inner awareness with other people's opinions. Not everyone will see what you see. Not everyone will feel what you feel. And if you start collecting too many voices, you'll end up disconnected from your own clarity. This doesn't mean you isolate yourself or reject wisdom. It means you become selective about whose input you allow to influence your decision. Because sometimes, what is obvious to your spirit is invisible to others. And if you ignore that, you will talk yourself out of what you already knew. Third, you sit with the discomfort instead of trying to fix it immediately. This is uncomfortable, but it's necessary. Most people treat discomfort like a problem that needs to be solved. They rush to eliminate it. But not all discomfort is negative. Some discomfort is revealing. It's showing you that something doesn't align, even if you can't articulate why yet. If you rush to remove that feeling, you remove the very signal that was trying to guide you. Sitting with it doesn't mean you stay stuck. It means you give yourself enough time to understand what your spirit is already sensing. Fourth, you choose peace over potential. And this is one of the hardest things to do, because potential is attractive. It makes you imagine what could be. It pulls you forward with possibilities. But peace is different. Peace doesn't try to impress you. It doesn't rush you. It simply remains steady. Scripture says, "Let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts." That word rule matters. It means peace is not just a feeling, it's a filter, a decision maker. If something has potential but takes away your peace, you need to question whether that potential is actually aligned. Because here's the deeper insight. God often speaks through what doesn't sit right, before anything goes visibly wrong. He doesn't always wait until something falls apart to get your attention. He places a quiet check in your spirit beforehand. Not to confuse you, but to guide you early enough to avoid unnecessary damage. And if you learn to respect that, if you learn to pause, reduce noise, sit with what you feel, and choose peace over possibility, you will start making decisions from a completely different place. Not from pressure, not from fear of missing out, but from clarity. Because the strongest decision is not always moving forward. It's not always saying yes. Sometimes the strongest and most mature decision you can make is recognizing when to walk away, even when you had every reason to stay. Walking away does not mean you missed something. It means you recognized something. And that shift alone is maturity. Because immature thinking always assumes that every opportunity must be taken, that every open door must be explored, that every yes leads to growth. But as you grow, you begin to see differently. You begin to understand that not every door is yours, not every opportunity is alignment, and not every yes is progress. Some things move your life forward. Others just move you away from yourself. You are not being restricted. You are being trusted. Trusted with discernment. Trusted with the ability to choose wisely, even when no one is watching, even when there is no clear reward, even when walking away feels like it costs you something in the moment. Because the truth is, what you avoid today can protect you from what you would have had to recover from later. And that kind of wisdom doesn't come from information. It comes from formation. So if you've been feeling that inner check, that hesitation, that quiet sense that something isn't right, don't ignore it. Don't override it just to keep moving. That awareness is not there to hold you back. It's there to keep you aligned with who you are becoming. If this message helped you see more clearly, take a moment to respond, not out of pressure, but out of alignment. Like this video as a simple agreement that clarity matters more than confusion. Subscribe to Chosen by God if you want more grounded, mature perspectives like this. Messages that don't just motivate you, but help you think, discern, and grow. And if this resonated with you, comment, "I choose alignment over urgency." Because at the end of the day, God is not trying to limit your life. He is teaching you how not to lose yourself in the wrong one.